Exploit blockchain.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Woo! So my name is Paulo. I'm from Bexham, and today I would like to share with you something. So when given this opportunity, I was really thinking deeply about what I could talk about, and many different points came on my mind. And this is essentially the premise, what this speech is going to be about. And the first point is that it's not going to be a sales pitch. I'm not going to be here talking about how amazing our product is, how you should totally go and buy it, invest into it. Because I've seen many times there were keynotes, and that was essentially what it was about. So they tell you about a problem, and then, oh, by the way, this is what we are solving. Yeah, you should totally go and buy into our product. And I find that extremely bothering, disrespectful in a way. That, okay, I understand that you've identified an area where you can help out, but if I am interested in that area, I will gladly come to your booth and talk to you to know more about it. I don't need you to shove it down my throat. And that's the approach that I wanted to take for today. At the same time, my task, my goal, is to bring something of value. Something that you, when the speech is over, you can go back and feel, okay, I learned something, and I learned something that I can apply. But it's not going to be something technical, it's going to be rather in business development. So if you are in a business area, if you are going to, if you are looking for ways how to improve the way how to lead the business, that's a speech that is going to be for you. All right. So, with the premise made clear, let me start by asking you, the audience, some questions. Yes. First question is, who is here from Ukraine? Raise your hand. Woo! Yeah, all right, so 80% roughly. Who is from another European country? Okay, not so. Where are you from? Moldova, okay. Over there, I saw some hands. Where? Berlin? Wonderful. Who is from outside of Europe? All right, where are you from? Russia. Russia is in Europe now. I've always been taught that until Ural, it's still Europe. So Moscow, St. Petersburg. But that's actually interesting. So I learned something new today. Okay, so who is from outside of Europe and outside of Russia? Someone else? Where are you from? Canada, wonderful. Yeah, so we can see how always in this kind of conferences, there are people from many different countries. So last year, there were from 30 different countries, and it's not just about the conferences. Always when you're dealing in the blockchain space, in the blockchain environment, that it's a very international environment. And that's the amazing speed. So blockchain coming as the world of the internet, it's always going to be extremely international. And the wonderful point about this is that being from the internet, English is the main language. So I can be standing here, I can be standing in San Francisco, I can be standing in Tokyo, and I can always use English, and most people will understand me. And this gives me the idea. I was like, great, okay, then we speak English, then it's going to be easy to make business as well. But what we can very easily forget is that there's an added layer of problems to the communication. It's not just the language barrier. It's a cultural barrier. Because when you don't speak the same language, it's very clear, okay, maybe we need a translator, we need someone to bring aboard just to explain that, just to make sure that we both understand. But sometimes, even though we speak the same language on a very high level, or even though we have a translator who's just translating the words, there's the cultural barrier that brings some misunderstanding. Let's see concretely what I mean by that. Let's take a look, for example, at scheduling. Let's say I'm organizing an event or a meeting or whatever. I'd say, okay, let's meet at 2 o'clock. According to your country, to what your country says, so not personal, because personally everyone, we can have a different feeling, but in the country, what is an acceptable time, range of time, to be late? So how late can I be to come to this meeting, and I don't have to apologize so much, like, oh, sorry for this. So A, not at all. So I always have to come to a meeting on time, ideally 10 minutes earlier, and if it's just 1 minute late, then it's already a problem. Option B, 5 to 15 minutes, it's all right. Or option C, even more than 15 minutes, it's fine. Okay, so from your countries, where do you feel, or if you feel your country is more type A, raise your hand. Okay, roughly 20%. If you feel your country is more type B, another 40. And if you feel your country is more type C, oh, wonderful, we don't have anyone from type C here. There are some countries, so I'm Italian, and we have differences even in Italy itself, where the north is more type B, but when you go to the south, to Rome or to Naples, it's like, we had a meeting at 1 o'clock, but I came at 1:30. Yeah, no big deal, come on. It can be extremely infuriating. Now, of course, I'm making fun of it, but I had a very concrete experience like that, where we were organizing an event. The event was supposed to start at 4. My boss was from south of Italy, then he came to the event, it's like, oh, not everyone is here yet. Okay, let's start it from 4:30. And I was like, how can you start from 4:30? I mean, there's people here already waiting. We cannot make them wait even longer. It's so disrespectful towards them. No, it's better to have more people here. So it's something that can happen very easily. And this is what I call, or what we call, the differences in cultural dimensions. So scheduling is one of the cultural dimensions, where you have countries which push more for a very rigid, clear-cut scheduling, and others which push to be more flexible, to be able to react to the environment and to not take a time too concretely or too seriously. And the cultural dimension that I want to talk today about mainly is the one of communication. So in communication, we distinguish two types of communication, so-called low context communication and high context communication. What do we mean by that? When in low context communication countries, the communication is very much precise, direct, clear-cut. I say A, I mean A. There's no room around it. I say very clearly what I mean. So the communication is precise, it's simple, it's clear. It's repeated, because I very much want you to understand what I'm saying. So if you've ever been to a public speaking course, and they tell you when you have to give a speech, start by saying what you're going to talk about, then talk about that topic, and then when you finish, summarize what you talked about. It's a very much a low context advice. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Make sure that you repeat yourselves as many times as possible to make sure that the information reached your audience. And since there's so much constant repetition, since the information is so direct, then all the information that is taken, what we hear, it's heard and it's taken at face value. I'm not looking for hidden meanings behind what you tell me. If you tell me that you are fine, then you are fine. And I'm not going to try to guess if you are not fine or not. On the other hand, we have so-called high context communication countries, where the communication there is different. It's different in the way that it's more sophisticated. It's more nuanced. When I tell you something, I can give you a direct answer. I can give you a certain words, a certain answer, but I can mean something behind it. So if you were yesterday at the panel and I was talking here about how the Japanese communicate, and there it's a very concrete example of this. When a Japanese wants to say yes, he says yes. When he wants to say no, he says yes. And the difference is in the pause. So he says something, if you take it at face value, you think, okay, it's great, I understand it. But in reality, he's trying to convey a different meaning in a different way. And the information is also often very much implied. Another example from a Japanese communication, I'm going to draw a lot from Japanese culture because right now I live in Japan. And it's, when we were scheduling, or when we tried to schedule for an event, and I say, okay, can you be there on this day, on the 8th of October? Then my Japanese colleague would say, oh, it's difficult. Now, if I hear it's difficult, what I understand is it's difficult, but I'm going to make my best in order to be there. When a Japanese person from a very high context culture says it's difficult, what he means is, no, I cannot be there on the 8th. But I cannot tell you no directly because that is very rude. I've been taught my whole life, in my whole country, in my whole culture, that I have to preserve harmony. I have to keep a certain level of balance among the team, and if I say very strictly and very directly no, I'm breaking the harmony and I'm being a bad person. I'm being uneducated. So I tell you no in a different way. It's difficult. And because of that, because of the way how they are taught, people learn to read between the lines. So it's not just about what is a person telling me, it's very much about how is he telling me that. If we take all the cultures and we put them on a line from low context to high context, here we can see how they would range in. So we have some countries which are extremely low context, like the US, Canada, Australia, and other countries which are on the opposite extreme, as extremely high context, Japan, China, Korea as an example. Now, what we have to understand here is that it's not so much about where exactly a certain country is standing, but it's more about where is my country standing as opposed to another one. So if I'm, let's say, where am I? Here, from Italy, if I communicate with someone from India, Kenya, China, then of course, it's a high context culture, but they're going to be more high context than I, so there's no problem. But if I communicate with someone from Poland, Poland for me is a very low context culture. I have to be much more direct with them. So as an Italian, it's very typical and very normal for me to use humor and sarcasm when communicating. So as someone asked me, do you think this is a good project? I'm like, yeah, come on, it's absolutely. I can see you've given your all in order to work on it. And if they take it at a low context culture, they think I'm praising them, but I'm actually making fun of them. So when I talk with someone from Poland, I have to be more careful and be more low context. But then when someone from the States talks with someone from Poland, Poland is more high context than the States, than American. So it's really not so much about where exactly on the line is, but to be constantly aware this person from this culture, how has he been educated? Has he been educated more high context than me, or more low context than me? And then when we have this situation, we also have to understand which countries do they have the highest difficulty communicating together. So let's say we have two low context countries, like America and Germany. Then we have a low context and a high context, America and UK. And we have two high context countries, UK and Japan. Now, which of these cases do you think have bigger difficulties communicating together? So, who thinks two low context countries? Nobody, okay. Who thinks low context and high context? Okay. And who thinks two high context cultures? Very well, so half-half. The answer is two high context countries. Now, why? Because this is the important point to understand. When you have someone from a low context culture, it's very clear that the information is at face value. So if you are from a high context, step by step, you learn that when you communicate with this person, you just communicate at face value. But when you have two countries from high context, the context is completely different in both countries. And it's very difficult to find the common ground, to understand at what level do we does the words that we use mean the same thing. So, for example, if we finish this speech and then we say, someone would ask you, oh, how was the speech? You might say it was interesting. Now, if you come from America or from Germany, when you say something is interesting, it's very clear, it's interesting. I learned something, it was good, for me it was interesting. If you come from the UK, interesting can very often have a negative connotation. Oh, how was the speech? Well, interesting. And then if you come from Japan, interesting means funny. And here's the problem. Okay, if I'm communicating with someone from America, even though I keep using interesting in a more like negative meaning, eventually I learned that this meaning does not reach the Americans and I have to use something else for them to understand what I'm saying. But if I'm communicating with someone from Japan, what does interesting mean? Is it negative? Is it funny? Is it something completely different? It's very hard to understand. It's very hard to reach understanding among two high context cultures. But luckily there is a solution. When we talk with someone from a low context culture, when we realize that we have someone from low context culture, here are some of the solutions that we approach. First, it's very important to be transparent and clear. Now, from a high context culture, often people are taught that if you say the things directly, then it's rude, because you are implying that the other person is too stupid to understand you. When talking with someone from a low context culture, we have to ignore this aspect and just try to be transparent and clear, say the things as they are. At the same time, when we don't understand what the other person is saying, it's important to ask for clarification, not just try to understand what was the meaning behind the meaning, but to ask for clarification. And lastly, a typical advice in any business environment, whenever there's a call, there's a speech, there's a meeting, send a recap email. Hi, today we've met and we've discussed these points, can you please confirm? Or just, they don't even have to confirm, it's clear, this is what happened. And this is great because it's a repetition. We can see that we really all understood what we meant. Then, when we talk with someone from a high context culture, these are the steps. First, it's important to not assume that the person is trying to trick us. that they are trying to cheat us, that they are hiding information on purpose. They are not doing it on purpose to hurt us. This is just the way they've been taught, that it's been done properly. It's important to practice listening, so not just what is being said, but how is it being said, and to ask open-ended questions. So this is what I wanted to give you today. I'm sorry, I would have loved to tell you more, but I'm out of time. So if something of this caught your attention, I would love to talk more about this in detail. If you would hear about our product, I'll be there at the booth. Thank you, everyone. You were a wonderful audience. You were very engaged, and I wish you to enjoy the rest of this evening. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Paulo. And so next, we have our title sponsor giving his keynote talk. Remington Ong from Fanbushi Capital, he's a partner. And his talk is titled Market Size of Crypto Security. Please welcome Remington.
Thank you very much. How's everyone? How are you? Good. Are you enjoying the conference so far? That's good, that's good. I think while they put up my presentation, I just want to get a quick reading of the room. Who here has ever had a virus or malware or any sort of vulnerability on their computers? Raise your hands. Really? I would have expected more. Okay. Who here has invested in the crypto market at all? Bitcoin or ICOs or anything? Okay, not too bad. And finally, who here has ever lost any money or lost any crypto due to hacking or vulnerability or anything? Okay, I'm very sorry for you guys. But all right, now my presentation is up. So welcome to the most boring presentation today. I'm going to be talking about investing in a more secure blockchain ecosystem. One second. Excuse me. Okay. All right. My name is Remington, and I'm a founding partner at Fanbushi Capital. Fanbushi is the first venture capital firm in Asia focused on blockchain. We were founded in 2015. We started off as a small equity-focused fund investing in early-stage companies. But over the past 3 years, we've actually expanded to a much broader ecosystem. So right now, we manage what's called the GF network, which encompasses 4 different funds: Fanbushi Capital, Fanbushi Digital, Block Asset, and BK Fund, where between the 4 funds, we support over 120 projects, all focused on blockchain around the world. And how we differentiate from everyone else is that we're long-term investors. We're long-term believers in the space, and we believe that this is still the super early days of blockchain. We think that we're really comparable to the internet in the 70s, not even the 90s yet. So we're in this for the long term, and we look for and support projects and entrepreneurs who are also in it for the long term. So enough about us. Speaking about long-term market, I think everybody in here already knows that the crypto market has grown a lot. Even though we're dropping below the high price of this January, I think nobody will disagree that this will be a multi-trillion-dollar market in the coming years. And this growth is being driven by a lot of money being raised in ICOs over the past 18 months. In fact, over the past 2 years, over 1,000 projects have raised over $27 billion in ICOs alone. That's a lot of money. And as my buddy would say, hello, with great money comes great responsibility. If you think about it, you have a lot of young entrepreneurs and a lot of newcomers to the ecosystem that are managing really upwards of $200 billion and more of money. And with that much money, there's a lot at risk and a lot to lose. You could lose money to hackers, you could lose money to scammers, and you could lose money even to just plain old faulty and buggy code. So, as investors in the space, we want to build up the blockchain ecosystem in the long term. And we believe that this has the potential to disrupt a lot of industries. But for companies and for even people like my parents to actually use this, it needs to be a lot safer. So these are the kinds of questions that keep us up at night. Indeed, we did the numbers, and since 2011, just in the top 56 reported vulnerabilities, there has been $2.8 billion lost since 2011 from exchanges, from hacks, from scams. And the pace is actually picking up. It's getting faster and faster and larger because of that 2.8 billion, 1.8 billion of it happened just the first half of this year alone. Now, you would say that, all right, we have a $200 billion market cap, 1.8 billion, that's less than 1%, it's not that bad. But remember, these numbers were tallied based on the Bitcoin prices and the crypto prices during the time. So for example, the Mt. Gox hack of $450 million, that was based on 2013 prices of $300-400. So we did the math, and if you translate all the crypto that's been lost in these 56 incidents, at today's prices, that would equal 13.6 billion. That's almost 10% of what the whole market is worth right now. And to give you an idea, to put it in some context, $14 billion is more than MasterCard has made in the entire year last year. We're trying to disrupt the payments industry, for example, and this is, the money we lose is more than the whole, second largest card issuer in the world. This is just another chart showing more and more incidents being larger and larger. And like I said, these are problems that keep us up at night. So what do we do? How do we make crypto and how do we make blockchain more safe? To sort of start analyzing that problem, we need to first realize what the source of the problem is, where these vulnerabilities are coming from. So the good guys at Spatium have broken down some of the largest losses over the past few years and broken them down into 3 categories. The largest coming from exchange hacks, from CoinCheck and Mt. Gox and BitGrail and all those guys, making up 80% of the money lost. The second largest category is wallets. It could be buggy code or it could be fake or phishing wallets, makes up about another 20%. And the remaining comes from sort of smaller ICO phishing scams. But kind of knowing the broad category isn't really enough. So we've tried to break this problem down into all the possible attack vectors where there could possibly be vulnerabilities. So before you even start discussing wallets and exchanges and all that technology, actually one of the most common attack vectors is simply social engineering. A lot of money has been lost due to phone jacking, due to someone calling up T-Mobile and saying, hi, I lost my SIM card, can you send me a new SIM card? And then what you end up with is you end up being able to receive the text messages for two-factor authentication, which one of the speakers earlier was talking about earlier. So this doesn't even involve computers at all, it's just calling up the operator and taking advantage of human weakness. Now, assuming you don't get hacked through social engineering, there's malware and there's sort of access to the clients that you're accessing your crypto on, your computer or your phone. There are keyloggers, there are even sort of backdoors that allow hackers to access your private key backup. Some people might actually back up their private keys on the computers unencrypted, and that's been the source of loss for some money. The next is the wallets themselves. There have been lots of incidents of fake wallets. For example, MetaMask, one of the popular Chrome plugins, has fallen victim to people uploading fake versions of MetaMask. So I go to the Chrome web store, I download a fake version of MetaMask and send all my funds there. And people say that, all right, hardware wallets are probably the most secure now, but even hardware wallets are vulnerable. As, for example, there was a security researcher proved that Ledger could be prone to a supply chain attack where someone replaces the seed or replaces the firmware in the hardware wallet before you even receive it. And assuming your wallet and your clients are all safe, there's something that you might not be able to even detect, which is man-in-the-middle attacks. So for example, a lot of people use my Ether wallet online. A few months ago, a group of hackers actually manipulated, took over Google DNS servers to redirect myetherwallet.com to a phishing site. Essentially, to the user, he sees the certificate, he sees myetherwallet.com, he thinks he's using the real one, but he doesn't know that it's already been compromised in the back end. And then after that, then you get to 3 additional attack vectors, which is exchanges, the ICOs themselves. Some ICO websites have been hacked to sort of change the address where people are supposed to send funds to. And then finally, the blockchain and the consensus algorithm itself. For example, Bitcoin Gold was recently subject to 51% attack due to low number of nodes. So I'm not going to go into detail on all of this. There are a lot of more qualified people here to talk about this. But this is kind of the framework in which we try to identify how we solve the problem. So now that we know the problem, as an investor, we kind of look into 2 broad groups of solutions. One is how to invest in sort of more secure technologies. So how do we make wallets more secure? How do we make exchanges more secure? How do we make sort of this whole login process and authentication more secure? And then second is investing in cybersecurity services themselves. Starting from the first one, again, let's go back to this framework and let's kind of go through one by one. So in the case of social engineering, a lot of this has to do with, a lot of compromises have to do with two-factor authentication being hacked or sort of gaining access to some of these computers. So when we look broadly at the ecosystem, we see projects that are trying to solve this problem using decentralized identity, like Uport, for example, trying to sort of create logins and authentications without the use of traditional passwords. And then some others that are trying to solve multi-factor authentication as well, like Civic, for example, which is trying to replace SMS messages for website authentication. In terms of how you prevent sort of malware in a computer and how you protect your clients, there are projects like Polystorm, for example, which are creating decentralized threat detection, essentially trying to use the power of the crowd to improve malware detection and antivirus detection. And then when we're talking about sort of storage on your computer and storing backups of your private keys and so forth, we could be heading towards a future where decentralized storage rules. For example, right now a lot of people, you might access a computer that you don't own, but you have all your files available on Dropbox. But Dropbox itself still has its security issues. So hopefully in the future when we have more decentralized storage, then even if someone gains access to a client or gains malware, then because the actual private key or the actual data backups are being sharded across multiple nodes and encrypted, it won't be an issue even if they gain access. In terms of wallets themselves, kind of 2 solutions. One, obviously, sort of wallets are continuing to improve, both hardware and software wallets, and as investors, we're looking at sort of a lot of different projects that are trying to improve not only just security of the wallet, but actually user experience as well. Like if I lose my private key or if I lose my 12-word passphrase, are there recovery options? How can I make this more user-friendly to people? But if you think about it, I mean, it's the idea of having crypto is that you can own your own private keys and you can hold on to it. But to some users, to less technical users like my parents, for example, like holding your own private key is like me not putting my cash into a bank and stashing it under my bed. They're not experts in security. They don't really know how to handle the security around that. So one of the things that we're also looking very heavily at is crypto custody solutions. Essentially, can we sort of replicate safer third-party management of private keys and custody without giving up too much security? And then in terms of man-in-the-middle attacks, this is a little bit harder and a little bit further out there, but there are some interesting projects that are sort of being worked on right now. For example, decentralized DNS, decentralized content delivery networks, or decentralized routing. Essentially, sort of creating a decentralized network where you're not reliant on, say, Google DNS servers or a particular point of failure in your DNS. And as a lot of you know, sort of there's HTTPS certificates when you go to secure websites, but even the certificate agents can be hacked sometimes as well. So there are projects like NewCipher, for example, that are exploring more decentralized ways to certify websites and even certify smart contract addresses, for example. In terms of exchanges, obviously there's a lot of concentration in centralized exchanges right now. I think that there have been some decentralized exchanges that have come online but are suffering liquidity issues at the moment. But I think that sort of in the future it will be a general trend to move sort of more away from centralized exchanges and more towards sort of multiple points of error rather than a single point of error. But the other point of exchanges is that a lot of people still might keep some money in exchanges because if they want to hedge against crypto volatility, they want to keep it in fiat. And sort of the only way other than exchanges is through stable coins. So that's why over the past 6 to 8 months, there have been dozens of new stablecoin projects come online. 2 of them just got approved by the New York State. And hopefully this will also lessen the need to store money in exchanges in the future. In terms of ICOs themselves, I mean, there are lots of ICOs. It's hard for people to sort of determine what's reliable and what's not. So that's why there are projects like Masari that are helping improve the diligence process and helping sort of provide more research to people so that they can actually prevent people from investing in scams. But aside from scams, there's also plain old sort of buggy code and sort of using buggy soft contracts, which is why projects like Zeppelin are actually very interesting. Like having tested libraries of smart contracts that people can leverage for free, and basically the whole community, there's a virtuous effect of the community testing the code all together and improving it together. And finally, in the underlying protocol, there are obviously sort of a lot of new consensus algorithms being developed from DAG to proof of authority and so forth, and proof of stake, and new encryption algorithms. These are also very far out. I think they're very technical. It's hard to know if they will work, but I think that a lot of people are trying to also find ways to improve the shortcomings of POW and other consensus algorithms. So that's how you kind of invest in the broader, that's how we think about investing in sort of a broader, more secure blockchain ecosystem. And then the second part of this is how we invest in cybersecurity services specifically. Now, the global cybersecurity market, I'm sure these numbers have been thrown around, but it's already a $100 billion market. This is not just blockchain, this is global cybersecurity overall. And the blockchain, so this blockchain-specific cybersecurity is still an emerging market, and there aren't really any reliable numbers yet. But the way we look at it, in terms of the crypto world, we're actually managing a lot of assets. We're managing $200 billion of sort of crypto in the whole market right now. So the most direct comparison I could draw is probably to a financial institution. So if you take JP Morgan, for example, an organization that manages $2.4 trillion in assets, last year they invested $600 million in cybersecurity services only. So as a percentage, that comes out to 0.0025%. Now that might not seem like a lot, but if you take crypto, again, around 200 billion market cap, I think it's falling a little bit today, and you apply that same ratio, this comes out to $55 million, at least a $55 million market as of today, right now. And this might not seem like a lot, but this is specifically for cybersecurity services like consulting, like penetration testing, like security audits. This is actually not that small for a market that we're seeing. But one thing to also note is that in terms of future growth, there is a lot of growth potential here because obviously we all believe that the 200 billion market cap will grow. And because blockchain is decentralized, we think that security spending as a ratio of the total value will actually have to be higher than a centralized organization as well. So we think that there's, even though we're not projecting any numbers here, we think that the growth rate for cybersecurity in the future years will grow very fast. Again, if we look at sort of from an investment perspective, about 2.5% of ICOs over the past 3 years have been focused on sort of security projects. And when you compare that to traditional venture capital, $7.6 billion was actually invested last year into cybersecurity projects, or about 4.6% of total VC deals. So we think that there's still room to grow for newer cybersecurity projects in the blockchain space, and this is just some of the projects that have raised funding over the past year. Again, more and more services are popping up. This is just a small list of about 20 sort of smart contract auditors that are listed on an Etherscan. I think more and more projects are coming online, and we're also, as investors, we're also looking very intensely at sort of how this space will continue to grow. I'd love to speak more, but unfortunately my time is up. So again, to summarize, as investors, we look at investing in more secure technologies and investing in cybersecurity services because we believe that this will help drive the mass market adoption that we all believe blockchain will bring. Thank you very much.
HackIT. Exploit blockchain.